Good morning, and it's so exciting for me to be here because this is the first Rancho Mirage Writers Festival since I moved to the Coachella Valley. So I'm very happy to be here. And Ben, welcome to the desert.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Dave.
I'm really happy that you're here. We have a lot to talk about, and obviously many people who watch TCM are aware of the fascinating people with the last name Mankiewicz from the movie business. Your grandfather, Herman Mankiewicz, wrote Citizen Kane. The movie Mank was about him. Gary Oldman played him. Your great-uncle, Joseph Mankiewicz, wrote and directed All About Eve, my favorite classic film of all time.
I'm not sure I realized that.
Oh my gosh, hands down. What, that he did it or that I love it?
No, I knew that he did it. I was aware of that fact.
There's no better. Your brother, of course, Josh Mankiewicz, is a correspondent on Dateline, such a great voice, such a great reporter. But I want to talk about first your dad, Frank Mankiewicz, who was press secretary to Robert F. Kennedy. So in a way, my imagination is that your upbringing probably had a little bit more politics in it than it did entertainment.
Infinitely more politics than. I mean, it was like there was a wing of the family that was out in Hollywood, and I guess they did some nice things. Like that was sort of. But my dad, I mean, he wasn't just the smartest person I ever knew. He was really almost the smartest person anybody ever knew. And so, and he was just and growing up in D.C., he was a big deal. And so it didn't occur to me that there would be other accomplished people in the family that I ought to pay attention to until it's sort of embarrassing considering my job pretty late in life before classic movies sort of came to matter to me. Again, I mean, I knew that his father wrote Citizen Kane because he would always remind me that he wrote every word of Citizen Kane. And Joe Mankiewicz was alive, and he would call my dad often, and we'd speak. So I knew Joe a little bit, but again, the focus was on my father, who had this giant life. Ran George McGovern's campaign. He was the first Latin American director of the Peace Corps. Then met Bobby Kennedy while in the Peace Corps and got a job first in the Senate as his press secretary, and then for the presidential campaign. Many people know my father for announcing the senator's death in 1968 after he was shot in Los Angeles when I was just a baby. It was politics. My family was ensconced in D.C. political culture. My father would have there are many friends of my father here at the festival who I just saw last night. So.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
Has it gotten to a place now where you, because of 18 years on TCM, are educating your family members about different things of Herman or Joe?
Yeah, no question. It's very weird. So, I mean, first of all, I don't know whether you feel this, but there's some, getting paid to talk about other people's art. It's just weird, right? Right? It's strange. And because people in my family made some of that art, I feel like it doesn't always sit well with me. Like I've pulled some scam here. My father, when I would express that to him, would say, do you have any idea if your grandfather knew this, how happy he'd be?
Of course.
And that he'd be like, wait a minute. Your job is what? Oh my God, that's fantastic. That is an unbelievable. Well done. So, but it still does get to me sometimes.
Not to totally put you on the spot, but just because this popped into my head, is there something in your research or in any of the interviews you've done? I know you've interviewed Kirk Douglas, who starred in a movie that Joe Mankiewicz did. Have you learned anything in your job as a TCM host that you didn't know just as a family member with the last name that you've then run back and said, oh, look what I just found out or heard?
Oh, I mean, unquestionably. I mean, I find out stuff all the time. I mean, it was a good couple of years to be a Mankiewicz. I mean, the movie Mank,
yes.
Right, which I loved. But I don't know whether you guys know this was called Mank. And they say Mank in it, I don't know, like 117 times. And so my wife and I saw it I did a story for CBS Sunday Morning on Fincher and the making of the movie, and he screened it for just the two of us at his studio, at his theater. And as soon as so we're sitting there in the theater by ourselves in the middle of the pandemic, and the title card comes up, and I started to cry, right? And then right from the first scene, it was just, that's how my father described his father. He died in 1953, so I never knew him, but that is how he described him. And then there was 2 books that came out on the relationship between Joe Mankiewicz and Herman Mankiewicz, which was a complicated relationship. They had been very close. Herman brought Joe to L.A., very much like being the big shot. My grandfather, for a time, I mean, he ended up dying with no money at all. A family member had to buy the house that my grandmother lived in. But he was the highest paid screenwriter in Hollywood for a while. He didn't care about money. For many years in the 30s, he was the highest paid screenwriter in Hollywood. But he kept getting fired. He got fired all the time. Fired from almost every studio. And then as Joe became more successful, that relationship fractured in many ways. And Joe carried a great deal of bitterness about that. So there were 2 books, one written by Sidney Stern, one written by my cousin Nick Davis, called Competing with Idiots, which is an excellent, had to do with the famous line that Herman brought Ben Hecht out to, many of you probably know, brought him out to Hollywood. He said, when he was writing title cards for silent films, he said, basically paraphrasing, except for the end, I'll get right. He said, get out here as soon as you can. There's millions to be made. Everyone else is an idiot. Don't let this get around.
That's our secret.
Yeah, that's right. And Ben Hecht came out and made millions. So you mentioned Kirk Douglas, I think at the second TCM Film Festival in 2011. Kirk Douglas had his stroke. So this conversation that he was going to have at the festival with me was one of the first big interviews they gave me. But it was going to be very short. Talking was not easy for him, and it was just really bring Kirk Douglas out, have him tell one story about, I don't even remember what we were showing, but Kirk Douglas, by the way, is the star and producer of my favorite movie, Paths of Glory, Kubrick's 1957 film. But, so we get Douglas, so I go backstage to meet him, nervous, and he calls me close, he's like, brings me in close, and I'm like, he goes, yeah, who's Joe to you? And I'm like, he's my uncle. He's like, yeah, I made a movie with your uncle. And I go, yeah, no, I know, Letter to Three Wives, when Joe won the Oscar for Best Director and Best Writer before All About Eve the next year. And he goes, nah, the other one, a Western, right? And I'm like, oh, right, yeah, There Was a Crooked Man. He goes, yeah. Brings me in close again. I lean in, he goes, do you know what I learned about your uncle in that movie? I'm like, no, what's that? He goes, I learned your uncle shouldn't make a Western. Yeah, it definitely counts as a story I didn't expect to hear out of Kirk Douglas.
That was not part of the family lore.
No, I don't think he's wrong. He's wrong.
I've introduced that a couple of times on
Yeah.
TCM. I seem to recall Kirk Douglas in a barrel taking a bath or something, or someone is. Anyway,
Yeah, that's by the way, one of my wife and I talk about this all the time. Like every Western, I do like good Westerns. I saw The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance last night again. I hadn't seen it in years and years and years. But I always think, how badly do these people need to take a shower or a bath? Right? Oh, every movie, God, it's so unbelievably dusty. And then you take a shower, you walk outside, some horse-drawn carriage drives by, and then I just took a shower. It's going to be like 9 days before I can take a shower again.
it's like the sugar cookie from last night's speech.
That's right.
Okay, so by my count, 5 Oscars in the Mankiewicz family. 4 for Joe for writing and directing Letter to Three Wives and writing and directing All About Eve. 1 for Herman, for writing Citizen Kane.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Where are the statues?
Well, Herman's statue, Herman didn't care about money. He really didn't. He lent money. People you'd borrow, you'd say to Herman, I need $500 to pay off a debt. And Herman would give you $1,000 because he'd be like, well, you'll need the $500 to pay off the debt, and then you need $500 to,
Have fun?
just get yourself established again,
right.
sort of whatever it is, whatever your issue is. And he also borrowed money because then he would have none. A couple times my dad and his brother, who was older, and then eventually his sister, much younger, Johanna, they had to move out a couple times of their house on Tower Road in Beverly Hills, up the hill a little bit, and take an apartment on Olympic Boulevard so they could stay in the school district. They just rent the house for a while when things were down for Herman. So Herman didn't display his much. Eventually, it went to my father. Joe had his Oscars on his mantle, and when you'd walk into the house, he lived in Bedford, New York, and he would always, and not a person walked into the house that he wouldn't direct toward the mantle.
That's great.
I did a piece on Richard Dreyfuss for CBS Sunday Morning, and Richard has come on the TCM cruise. He was on the TCM cruise with me and Dave.
It's a piece of work.
Yeah, a couple months ago in November. And I like Richard very much, but he is a piece of work. He's not, the others aren't like him. And so Richard, so he won his Oscar for The Goodbye Girl from 1977. And for years and years and years, he put it in his refrigerator. So people would come over. You go to anybody's house, as someone who's a known Oscar winner, you want to see the Oscar, you know. So Richard put it in his refrigerator so that he would, you know, he'd be like, hey, can I get you something to drink? He'd say, yeah, just go help yourself. Yeah. And when I went there, he had taken it out by then, but he put it in. It was right next to I swear to God, a bottle of borscht and buttermilk. I'm like, yeah, this is very Jewish. This is very, very Jewish.
Wait, so I'm sorry, I'm not going to let this go. So Manx Oscar went to your dad. Now where is it?
I don't know. We don't know. We sold it. You were allowed to sell those. It got sold because that thing about not really caring about money got handed down to my father. And he owned it, and his brother owned one of the Rosebud sleds. It wasn't one used in the movie, but it was one given at the wrap party by Ben Hecht to Herman. Ben Hecht has come up again. So, but my Uncle Don, who I liked a lot, and has an Oscar nomination for I Want to Live, screenwriter for I Want to Live, and he wrote like the pilot episode of Ironside. He wrote a very famous Star Trek episode called The Court Martial, and I'm leaving a bunch of stuff out. He had a lot of credits, a lot of big 70s TV, 60s and 70s TV. But Don was a compulsive gambler, as I am. But Don bet a lot more. And so Don would often need money, and he asked my father. They together owned my grandfather's annotated Citizen Kane script, and Don wanted to sell it to get money, and it sold it and made a lot of money in like the early 90s. Steven Spielberg bought it. And so then Don asked my dad if he could sell the Citizen Kane Oscar and just give him a cut. And you know, my dad was like, yeah, sure. Also, it was sitting. My dad had put it in storage. I mean, in a safe deposit box because it was too much to insure. Wow. He didn't like seeing it. Didn't mean it. He was like, he wanted. I don't care where it is.
Wow.
Right. And so because he was kind, my dad, and wanted to help Don, they sold it. And the thought was, Spielberg's going to buy it. This will be great, and he'll do the same thing with it. He'll put it somewhere, and that's where it should be anyway, right? People can see it, but some numbnut bought it, and we don't know who it is. I'm actually interviewing. I got to go back to LA tomorrow for a few hours to interview Spielberg for TCM, and you know, over the course of the last 6 months, getting to know him just a tiny little bit, we've talked about because he wants to buy back Oscars. So I want to again drive home and go find that one.
Go find
it.
Go
find my family's Oscar, and then you give it to the Academy or to me, whatever you think's best. Yeah, but he'll find it. I imagine if it becomes available, he'd want that, and the script is, you know, nicely on display. So,
I love that.
Yeah.
So here you are in this job that you've had now for 18 years, which is such a perfect fit for you for all the reasons we've discussed, and you're a pleasure to watch. And I've really found fascinating the stories that you've told me and the other TCM hosts over the years of all of the different TV shows and TV jobs that you auditioned for before TCM. Your background was in local TV news. You did some kind of lifestyle shows as well. And then you had this run of years where you were auditioning for just everything. What were some of the things that stand out to you that you auditioned for that people would be surprised about?
This is probably not a crowd that has super fond memories of the syndicated dating show Blind Date. So Blind Date had a spin-off show because Blind Date
It was big.
didn't suck enough. Like, let's make a show that's just a little worse. And there's a show called Shipmates, which was people on a cruise who'd never met, sort of meeting on a cruise and whatever happens there, right? And so I haven't done a lot of noble things in my life, but this is slightly one of them. So I wasn't working, and I made some kind of audition for that. I don't even remember what, you know, you just, in a sterile room, you're just reading cards, and. But I was one of 3 people, finalists for that job, and they make you sign, like they did in the old studio system, they make you sign a 7-season contract, a 7-year contract. Right then, before they've offered you the job, which means like, hey, this is what we're gonna pay you. If you get it, this is it. There's no negotiating. We just activate this contract. And, you can negotiate that. And my agent, and I had an agent that I don't now, and we were going over, things, and I was like, you know what? I can't do it. Like, what if I get it? Oh my God. What if I get it? And of course, there's no way if I was the host of Shipmates, I think it only aired 1 season, maybe 2. There's no way I would have gotten the TCM job. So, so it was a good decision, but it's a hard decision when you have, you don't have money and you're, I'd moved to LA by that time from Miami where my last journalism job was. And yeah, your temptation, of course, is to take anything. And I was open to a zillion things. I mean, I wanted to host a late night show. I wanted to host I wanted to host a talk show. That's what I thought was most likely. And then, and I probably went 138, and then I got the TCM gig.
Did there ever come a time where you considered giving up on it and trying to pursue a different thing, or was it not?
I really don't know. I honestly don't know what that would have been. Like, I don't quite know. So I guess, I mean, this is a crazy thing to say to these people here, thought about writing. but I mean, that would have come with the same anxiety, right? Certainly at that point. I didn't go to law school. I went to journalism school. I mean, so I could always be a journalist. I mean, I could, and so in a sense, the answer to your question is, yeah, I think weeks, certainly a month at most away. I mean, I'd run out of money. I had no money. I got paid after the Miami job for a little bit, like a little over a year. So that made looking for work easy. 9 months, I think I got paid. And, but I was going to take a job, I would hope in Los Angeles at a local TV station. I mean, I'd have to get it. I might have gone to, I might have ended up in, Minneapolis or Cleveland, or I'm not knocking those cities. That's just where, might have been. I'd worked in Charleston, South Carolina, and Miami prior to that.
We've all spoken, and I've heard you speak about this several times. There is something special about TCM as far as the relationship that our network has with the people that watch it. And I think maybe Bravo is the only network that I can think of where people are fans of not just a show on the network or a couple of shows on the network, but the entire network. And that's something we hear a lot. People have TCM all day. When you started, I think 2005, when did you
2003. This will be 20 years this year.
20, oh my God.
Yeah, in the summer.
When did you really kind of come to learn to appreciate that, the uniqueness of TCM in that regard with its relationship?
There's not a moment. And then you realize at some point. So certainly the first festival where I met my wife, by the way, who's here.
That's coming up in a few minutes, don't you worry.
But the festival where you suddenly are surrounded by all these TCM fans. But also just the longer I was there and the more times people stopped me, you could just see it. It's different. And what they say, they don't say, hi, nice to meet you, can I get a picture? I mean, they sometimes do, but mostly what they say is thank you, right? And then social media also, and you'd see all these people who define themselves by their TCM fandom, right? So, I'm a mother and a dog lover and a TCM fan.
All right.
Right? I'm a lawyer and a sister and a classic movie fan. Right? So, yeah, I think it's true to some extent with Bravo, but I don't think it's at the same level. I don't think it defines them. I think that there certainly are, and it happens with, I presume, the news channels, but that's a different breed of people, right? But I mean, we've had fans get tattoos, TCM tattoos, and they don't think it's weird at all, right? I guess I did maybe in the beginning. The question was, do I think it's weird? But not now. I get it. And it's nice and that's why the festival and the cruise have been so nice. I mean, they come and they get to see stars like, we had Richard Dreyfuss and Pat Boone and Lainie Kazan and
Chevy
Chase. So yeah, Chevy Chase on the cruise. And and they love hearing those conversations and meeting them. And they, they like meeting Dave and me and and Jacqueline and Alicia and Eddie, I guess. And they, no, they love they like meeting our hosts, but the thing they mostly get out of is meeting each other, right? Is finding this community that they're like, oh, wait, I'm not the weird person who likes black and white movies.
Right.
So it's, it matters. And that, took me a few years before I realized what a sort of special place this was, because the point Dave's making is in the history of the world, no one has ever said to another person in conversation, oh my God, I love Showtime. Yeah, what do you watch on TV? I love ABC.
Right.
Anything ABC puts on, I eat it up. Right, but it happens with TCM.
It does.
Yeah.
So I've been on the network now 6 years, and every once in a while they'll
Feels
put,
longer.
Thank you. Every once in a while they'll put like one of my old intros from when I first started on the app or something, and I'll happen upon it and I'll be like, oh my God, I'm just way too excited to be there. And it's so I feel like I've kind of chilled out a little bit. How do you think you've changed and evolved in this role in 20 years?
Well, as you probably do, I bristle when people go, "You've gotten so much better."
I've gotten that.
It feels like Earth's worst compliment. but then you see one of your early intros, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I did get better." They're not wrong. So it's Malcolm Gladwell. It's 10,000. It's repetition. You just get more comfortable. I mean, I'd been on television for 9 years. That's why I bristled a little bit, like I wasn't. And I'd grown up around him. My brother was on TV. He's 12 years older than I am. I've been imitating him my whole life. And he taught me how to be on TV. Taught me, how to write a TV story, how to write a news piece. Worry about your first line, your last line, your stand-up. The rest of it doesn't really matter. I mean, he gave a lot of pieces of advice, but those were the things to dwell on. He taught me to stop talking for a moment, like just be silent, and people will be eating dinner, and they'll hear nothing, and they'll look up. It works. So I slowed down, definitely. I used to, when we were shooting in those early days, 2003, 4, into 5, I would frequently get, they'd cut it in the middle, because we got to go all the way through. We can't. We have no edits, so we got to get those lead-ins. Eventually you got to get a clean, full take.
Oh, yeah.
Eddie's lead-ins are longer. He only does one a week, so he's got these 5-minute lead-ins, and you can edit those and get some coverage shots so that he doesn't have to get it all the way through, although he's kind of amazing when you see him do it. But they'd stop me often for going too fast. Yeah.
How interesting.
Yeah. And my mother, she would be like, oh, I saw you yesterday. You talked too fast. Your pants are too long. That was a pretty standard Holly Mankiewicz criticism, yeah.
That's what moms are
That's
for.
right, yeah. Anything else, Mom, you got from that? Glean anything else? Oh, you looked good otherwise, but the pants were very long. What do they want you to trip? Say that a lot.
How have you found in these 20 years of doing the TCM job, how have you found it being able to keep your interest in film and your interest in politics going at the same time? For a long time, you were also hosting a show,
Yeah, the
Young Turks.
Yeah.
And how difficult or easy was it to have all of that going?
It was always a worry.
Really?
That something in that area would bleed in and disrupt the comfort level that, this is we work for, Warner Brothers Discovery, but we've worked for AT&T and, whether we, or Time Warner. So these are big, giant corporate monoliths who sort of don't want controversy. And even though I don't think my political views are even moderately controversial, right? I mean, there are things that we disagree with about people, but I don't think they're controversial. It's like, I don't want us to be a communist state. I just want people to, not go bankrupt when they get sick, right? That sort of. How
dare you?
Yeah, I know. But yeah, it's been a definite little bit of a worry, and ultimately, even though TCM never asked, and I still do some stuff for the Young Turks, but I no longer come in and guest host. I started it with the other guy, Cenk Uygur was my partner in starting it, and he's now the face of it, and he's done an amazing job. He's still one of my closest friends, but I don't sit around and do a political show with him because I just feel like it just got too dangerous, and I don't want, I don't care if people know my politics, but I don't want to make the mistake of alienating these movies bring people together. They just do. I mean, I don't know, they bring people together in a lasting way, but it is nice that this is an area where people of all political stripes can feel the same way about Humphrey Bogart and Joan Crawford and Betty Davis and Dorothy Dandridge.
And we certainly have a diversity of political viewpoints amongst our viewership. I think
Oh, no
more so
question.
than
Yeah,
any
yeah,
channel
yeah. I
can
mean,
think of.
I imagine that, drawing some distinction about it is pointless. It's 50-50. I mean, it is not, doesn't tilt significantly one way or the other.
When you think
And
back,
a lot of those people are like, I really don't want to talk about politics
Right.
too. Like,
It's
this
their
is
escape.
a refuge from it. So, and it's a little challenging because sometimes when we write about the blacklist, well, we're gonna have to talk about politics a little bit. And they've given me free rein to rail against the blacklist, and that's nice, and I will continue to do that.
good. When you think back to all of the people, and for me in 6 years, it's a smaller list, but I have my favorites. Who are some of the most kind of memorable people that you've gotten to talk with either on the set, on the cruise, at the festival? Who sticks out?
So many. Angie Dickinson was the most fun interview I've ever done, still. We were in Austin, Texas for a screening of Rio Bravo, sort of to publicize the upcoming festival. And I don't like taking questions from the audience anymore. This is a different place. I would take them here because.
We will, by the way,
you
so
guys
start
are-
thinking.
But I mean, sometimes people, a whole Q&A can get ruined by one person who wants to tell a personal story and they can't. And that happened a lot. So, but this early stage, we were going to do it. They told me they'd like to do it, so I do it. And like second question is this guy sitting in the front row, and I don't want to typecast people, but he looks a little like the comic book guy in The Simpsons. And because his shirt does not come all the way down. And he comes up and he's got a poster. He clearly wants Angie to sign something. And he says, basically, I'll shorten it, but he says, I love you for a long time, and every night I want to. I had a poster of you when I was a kid, and when the lights were out, I'd stare up at the poster. And I'm like, okay, thanks, man. It's great. He's like right here. He's come all the way up to the stage, right? And as soon as I get up, I'm like, okay, thanks. Angie takes her hand and puts her hand out like to tell me to move back. And she picks up her chair, and she's like, go on. And I was like, oh, I like Angie. Yeah. But great, I'm interviewing Steven Spielberg tomorrow for TCM, and like I said, I've gotten to know him a little bit in the last 6 months. I've met him a few times, but in the last 6 months, we spent a little time. We're not friends or anything. I don't want to say that. These are all work-related things. But he's really interesting. Like, here's a big shock, And then people just come across like Matthew Modine. Like, oh my God, such a kind, and smart, thoughtful person who's got all these interesting things to say about the world, but listens to what you're saying. I loved Billy Bob Thornton. People, and then people I'd be incredibly nervous about. Max von Sydow, right? He was so good. He was so great, kind. I was scared to death of Alan Arkin. He was great.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah, so, every conversation you have with, Lou Gossett Jr. is going to be an interesting conversation, And then so many writers who've come in, and I don't say that because I'm here, that came out naturally, like just all these people who sort of dedicated years and years to, one thing, whether it's Alan Rhodey and Michael Curtiz, or whether it's, Barbara Stanwyck, or, or Scott Iman and Henry Fonda and Jimmy Stewart. Like, it's just, they're so eager to tell these really great stories. So, and then Dreyfus is great. And then to say things about like politics, like I did a piece for CBS on John Voight, and John Voight says a lot of really controversial things. John Voight loves actors. He loves other actors. He loves the craft. He loves the business, and he's very likable. And then he would and then he said that all the anti-war movements were infiltrated by Russian spies, in the Vietnam War. And I was like, I don't think that's true, but let's go back to the movies, and I like him a lot. I don't know what to tell you. It's really nice to connect with people about these movies. And Faye Dunaway, who was a challenge, but what got her going, sort of brought her back and got us a pretty good special out of it. I did a 2-hour interview with her in front of a live audience. And it was hard. She was not pleased. leading up to it. When the lights came on, she responded, but what she got into was craft, right? And that, so like, it's a great way to, get artists to open up about what they do and not feel, because, like my goal when I do one of these interviews in general, if it's in front of a live audience, I always say, like, my job is to get you like a couple of standing ovations. Like I was a journalist, but I'm not Mike Wallace. I don't have a, and according to this, and I got no, I don't have a got you moment here, right? I want to make them comfortable. So it's no good when they're not comfortable, but by and large, they're very comfortable.
As you alluded to a few minutes ago, TCM is not only responsible for this great career, but it's responsible for your family.
Yeah, totally.
Can you tell us all about that?
Yeah, so my wife, Lee, who's here, I met at the first TCM Classic Film Festival.
What was she doing there?
She's one of those, she loves TCM, and she tried to get her friends to come, but just to show you how it's great you find people, her friends were like, I'm going to a film festival for black and white movies, right? She also wanted to go out she wanted to come out here to the Valley and look at houses, not so much to buy, just design. She loves the design out here. She's an architectural junkie. So we met there, and like we met at the party in the first night and like got along, but nothing, said goodbye, right? And then we crossed paths again in Atlanta like 6 months later, and that sort of began where she had lived there and she was visiting friends there and came to an event, and now we have a person.
That person is your daughter.
The person is our daughter.
Who shares your birthday.
Who shares my birthday.
Which is so cool.
And named for my, who I mentioned before, my Aunt Johanna, my Aunt Josie.
Tell everybody about how you and Lee got married.
We got married on the TCM Classic cruise.
I wish I had been there.
Robert Wagner was a guest that year and walked Lee down the aisle. We had a lot of fun the night before, and RJ, that's what everybody calls him, and Robert, he had a lot to drink, and everybody did. And so the next day, it's like my wife's wedding day, and her family's not there. My dad happened to be on the cruise as a guest I did some interviews with my dad on that cruise. And so RJ's going to walk her down the aisle, and he loves Lee, but he's like, hey, look, I need you to, I have to wear sunglasses. Right? It's a rough night. I have to wear sunglasses. And if I have to wear sunglasses, I think you have to wear sunglasses. As they walks down the aisle, I guess my wife puts on her aviator sunglasses. And then he says to her, I'm going to tell you the same thing I told my daughters when they got married. Chin up, tits out. Let's go. But he is a universally beloved figure by just about everybody who knows him.
How are you indoctrinating your about-to-be 10-year-old daughter into the world of classic film? Does she care? Does she?
Not really, but she's not hostile to it, and she's learned to not be hostile, and that's a big step. Like, she used to ask all the time, is it in black and white, and the suggestion being that then she wouldn't want to watch it. But we see, just around the holidays, we see It's a Wonderful Life and Christmas in Connecticut every year, and she loves Christmas in Connecticut, loves that film. So she's good with it. It's not a Disney show, but it's okay. Yeah. So she's coming along, and you can't indoctrinate. But the funny thing is that she obviously doesn't. No kid. Well, her father's not a big deal, but no kid wants to think that anyway. And so, but we go to school in L.A., and some of the people of her classmates at her school are. Well, some of them are artists, filmmakers, right? But some of them also just like have TCM on all the time.
Oh, wow.
And that's the thing. It's like 99% of the people in the world, they have no friggin' idea who we are. No clue. But the 1% who watch, or whatever it is, they care a lot.
They do.
So when you get around people who care a lot, so that has been a surprise to my, she'd have friends who'd be like, your dad's on in our house all the time. And my daughter's like, what? Yeah.
She's a hoot. She's very precocious in the best possible way.
She is.
So listen, I know you're not David Zasloff, our new corporate boss, although we did get to meet him and spend some time with him recently when we were on the Warner Brothers lot shooting something, and he was very nice. But what do you envision as kind of TCM going forward? How do you think it's going to change? How do you think it's not going to change? What are your hopes? Are we going to have a job in 10 years, Ben?
I think we're going to have a job in 10 years. I do. And I mean, this is a very powerful brand for this, right? And a dedicated audience that will invest in that brand. So, I mean, every time we get new corporate overlords, there's a worry. I mean, they all inherit this colossal debt that they instantly have to pare down. And you know, our audience hates change more than you could possibly imagine. That's why when we change anything, they're like, that's it, they're gonna show commercials, it's over, that's the end of that, right? They're gonna colorize the movies, they're gonna show commercials, right? And I'm gonna wake up tomorrow and they're gonna have a Marvel movie on and this sucks. And we're like, no, we just all we did was change the logo, that's it. Because we have to remember that the movies, most of what we show is from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, obviously, it's more than that, but that's our wheelhouse. But we're existing in 2023. We have to, our goal is to make ourselves relevant in 2023 with these movies. That's the job, right? So we have to update, right? We're not gonna update the movies. We're not gonna, hey, you know, we should add a helicopter crash to Casablanca. Right? That's not, yeah, that would really sell it. What if, hear me out, yeah. And I think that, you know, this is, look, our new boss who has the same issues of paying down an enormous debt. But, you know, you're not going to do it on the backs of TCM. He's going to have to, you know, this is a company now that, in addition to owning all the Discovery networks, owns Warner Brothers, CNN, the NBA on TNT, baseball on TBS, and the Cartoon Network, you know, Nick at Night, all these things, not Nick at Night, but Cartoon Network, and then This Is Us, right? You know, Adult Swim is what I was looking for. Right. So he took Jack Warner's desk out of storage at Warner Brothers to make it his desk. He wanted that. I think that's like a good sign. He bought Robert Evans's house in the Hollywood Hills. Like, he knows, and he's very connected, and not in a weird, I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I mean, he started the Shoah Foundation with Spielberg. So he has, you know, both powerful friends in the industry have some influence over him, and he has some influence over them. And I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be good. You know, ultimately, when if in the end, if you only look to serve shareholders, then that's, you know, that obviously that works against artists all the time. But I hope, and I have a good feeling that they get it, that they get this as a valuable property. Same thing about that TCM thing. No executive who's ever been in charge of our channel has ever come up to an executive at a party and said, oh my God, I love that new show on TBS or TNT, right? I mean, it's just, what they say is, oh my God, I love classic movies, it matters to me, I love TCM. So I think he understands that. I'm more optimistic than I was a year ago.
And Zaslav has TCM on all day long while he's working in his office, and not just because we were in there in his office. We were told he has it on all day, and he was quoting things from commercials that have run.
He did. Again, this feels like name dropping, but because it is. But I was at a event where many people were, but I was literally in a conversation with Steven Spielberg, and his phone buzzes, and he looks at it, and he goes, hey, your boss is texting me about your channel right now. And it was because we were showing Gentleman's Agreement, and it was in the middle of the you know, sort of the new fun wave of anti-Semitism that we're experiencing in this country. And it was, you know, in the middle of this Kanye stuff, and the dinner, and Nick Fuentes, and he was like, Gentleman's Agreement's on. This is so great to see that we got a channel on the air that's, you know, putting this out, and we were talking about that and putting it in context. So I was like, all right, that's good. It was a good sign. That can only be a good sign.
Absolutely. Okay, we have a couple minutes left. I hope that you have some questions for Ben. Yes. Yes.
Hi. Just related to what you just mentioned, do you do sometimes it feels like there's programming based on current events in society. For example, Gentleman's Agreement. So do you program based on what's going on in the news?
The question is whether we do programming based on things that are going on in the news. Absolutely we do.
We do, but we program so far in advance that when it seems to work perfectly, it's probably just kismet. It's probably a happy accident. You know, Yeah, we caught a break with the anti-Semitism. Whew. So sometimes it seems more relevant than it might have been. But we definitely try to, look, man, like I said, we exist in 2023. We're going to keep showing the same movies, but we have to be relevant to the conversation today. So, but we do not, this channel does not react well to breaking news. Like we take our time to do things, and so, as what happens, you'll see some classic star die, and then we might wait 3 months to honor them, because we want to do it right, and we have to get the movies. Sometimes the movies aren't available to us that we would want to show in a tribute, so we wait until they're available. I mean, I think it works out, and I think our audience understands.
Hi.
Hi, I'm wondering if you think there's any hope for getting, they're not kids, people under the age of 35 interested in your films. I have not been able to succeed.
Question is whether we're hopeful we can get 35 and unders to fall in love with classic film. How are we going to do that? Josie has to lead the way, your daughter.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a, first of all, you can do it certainly with young artists. They are, because they get it. And, well, I mean, a filmmaker?
No, I'm a designer.
Right, so but I mean, it's very hard to come out and make a Marvel movie if you're a young director or screenwriter, but you can learn something from watching All About Eve, right? You can learn something from watching Out of the Past. So, we've just from from the first festival we had until the next one we have, which is coming up in April in Hollywood, it is staggering how many young people are there. Mm-hmm. So, and what we've also learned is that our audience has grown over the years. It hasn't shrunk, and obviously, it's an older audience. So I guess what happens is that you start reaching a certain age and you start gaining enough people start getting an interest in these movies. And as what we try and do, these movies still connect you to your past or your folks' past or your grandparents' past, whether it's a movie you saw with your grandmother or grandfather or heard about your grandmother or grandfather or mother or father watching, or you just know, man, I know my grandfather, my dad loved Westerns, right? I know my grandmother, she loved Westerns. And so you think as you sit there and watch Stagecoach, you're like, she watched this movie. Mm-hmm. This movie had an impact on her, and now I'm watching it. I think that it matters. I mean, I know it matters. That nostalgia is not a pennant on your wall. It's a really visceral human emotion. And that's our job, is to sort of make that emotional connection for you. So that works with young people. It does. Obviously, as always, it's hard to get young people to, read Hemingway. And
They find it too slow.
yeah, it is slow. It is slow. And video games and that culture has not helped. No question. It is slow. But I mean, by the same token, stuff from the 90s is frequently too slow for them.
But it's exciting when I hear like Julia Garner from Ozark. She loves TCM, and she's in her 30s. I mean, I love when I hear about some of these younger, to
I
your
didn't
point,
know
these
that. Yeah,
younger
that's great.
stars. So
She's
that's
a great actress, yeah.
Who else has questions? Yes, sir.
Do you get input from the cancel culture and woke crowd, and how do you deal with it if you do?
Well, we definitely do.
Whether there's input from the cancel culture crowd was the question.
Yeah, so we do. We started a series last year that we're still existing this year called Reframed, where we think about these movies in a different context. When the Gone with the Wind controversy came up, it wasn't new, by the way. The controversy's gone on. It just seemed to have some extra legs given the circumstances happening in the country. Gone with the Wind's super racist. It just is. So it's also one of the most important movies ever. Showed filmmakers how they can make a movie, what you can do in a movie. So it got taken off of HBO Max briefly, which is our sister network, for like a month, and we shot a lead-in to go with it. That's it. You still can watch the movie. You can skip the lead-in if you want to. So I mean, we embrace it. I think to be afraid to be hostile to this change again is to sort of dig your own grave. We don't stop showing movies that are clearly offensive in some ways. but when it's relevant to the, we don't want to do it every time if it's just one line or something here, but if it's a theme of the movie and we're introducing it, we try and mention, hey, there's blackface in this movie and it's gonna, it's gonna catch you off guard. Or it's throughout the movie and, but we want you to focus on these things, but yeah, they did this then and here's why they did it. And we produced a really good segment on the history of blackface and its origins and its costs, significant costs. And that runs on the channel, consistently. So I embrace it. I mean, what we do is put these movies in their proper historical and Hollywood context. So I saw this as a real opportunity for us to show what we do. And that never involves changing the movies, always making them available and showing them. The solution is not to cancel the movies in any way.
Well, Ben, thanks so much for taking the time. Thanks to you for being here and watching. We really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Enjoy the
everybody.
rest of the
Thank you.
week.
Thank you.
Thank you.